Wait, are we filming? I don't want them to know that these are fake. Hi, my name is Mia and welcome back to the Yap Section, the show where we talk about pop culture, music, and fashion. Today we are talking about Keke Palmer's new show, Southern Fried Rice. If you guys didn't already know, I personally feel I'm a very unique person to talk about this because I'm actually Blasian. My mom is Asian. Well, she's Chinese Jamaican, so we lean a little bit more culturally Jamaican. And then my dad is black, and I did grow up in Georgia. I'm from the South, which is where this show takes place. So, in brief, we have a Korean American character centered in an all-black cast. Yikes. A little bit of yikes. To make this even more interesting, I've seen people point out that Coco is played by a Chinese American person, and Southern Fried Rice is a Chinese dish. So I don't know why they didn't just make her Chinese instead of, I don't know why they chose Korean specifically. That's very interesting. I think Chinese would have been also like a good place to start because there's a lot of history between Black Americans and Chinese Americans. If you saw Sinners, like some of this is covered, especially in the South, where Chinese Americans were able to move a little bit more freely in the segregated South as opposed to Black Americans. And so it had this very complicated and nuanced relationship where they did have kind of a symbiotic relationship, but also some of the ways that Chinese Americans would get ahead is by pushing Black Americans back. So let's go ahead and delve into some of the problematic parts of this show, aside from centering a centering a Korean American in the midst of Black culture. Something that people have pointed out is that this seems to be something that needs to be taken on in a very nuanced way, that it's just not. In the wardrobe department, they have her in chains, in bonnets. I won't say they cornrow her hair at some point, but it is a possibility. But I think at the end of the day, it takes away some of the nuance of like why Black people do these things. Like, we don't just wear a bonnet just to wear a bonnet because it's for funsies. It is meant to protect our hair, protect our curls, really help in preserving them overnight. And if you have fake curls, like, girl, what are you preserving? You can put that shit back in the morning. It just loses a lot of its cultural context and meaning behind it when you put this girl into essentially this costume or this getup that she's wearing or like portraying without really having intention behind it. I will say, I'm not gonna watch the show. I don't want to give it any money or attention or anything like that. I did see one scene from it posted by one of the Black actresses who plays like Coco's roommate. And in it, Coco is basically being like, hey, my struggle and Black people's struggle is the same. Which, like, girl, you are already on thin ice. Like, at this HBC, like, don't piss me off. But you were raised by Black parents. I think she has Black siblings in the show, maybe. And you looked around at all that and said, I feel the struggle, sister. No, the fuck you don't. And she has to explain to her, she's like, girl, like, race is something that is very largely perception-based. It's why light-skin privilege exists, for instance. It's why there's things that happened in, like, when segregation was still a thing, or and Jim Crow laws were still a thing, where certain people could pass and have essentially white privilege because they were light enough to do so. It is something very heavily based in perception. And you do not look at that girl and go, she's Black, or she's a sister, or, whatever. But you look at her and you think she's Asian, you know what I mean? Which means that all the implications put on society for her are not those of Black people. It's those of Asian people. And so literally the character explains to her, like, girl, you are a model minority. Asians fall into the model minority category. They are, if we're going off of stereotypes of each racial category, and I want to obviously say I don't believe these are true. Everyone is their own individual person. No race or anything is a monolith. But everybody does have implicit bias, and Chinese Americans, or even just East Asians in general, are usually seen as smarter than Black people, are seen, like, Black people have this thing put on them where they're deemed ghetto or unruly or this or that because of how our hair looks, or, and so for you to, like, fake the curls, you know, for an aesthetic when we're actively being punished for having the curls. Like, the Crown Act was literally only passed in 2020, where you can't be discriminated against based upon your hairstyle. And I'm gonna go ahead and guess which group was being discriminated against based upon their hairstyles. So again, there's so much nuance in these conversations in Black culture that I don't think this show has the capacity to do. I think either A, someone said she would have made a wonderful side character in this show and centered a Black person instead, or, you know, Kiki girl, pick up a pen, maybe write a book, maybe explain more in detail the nuance and the things going on. But even people are confused on how this Asian American girl, if you're, you know, your whole story is being raised by these Black parents. Black parents are notorious for educating their kids on the world that they live in because they have no choice but to do so. Because they know at the end of the day, without that education, it's a harm to them. You can't just go out into the world and think that you are going to be treated the exact same as your Asian peers or your white peers. There are going to be challenges that you face solely because you are Black, and the best way to equip you with handling that is to educate you on it. And I don't understand why these Black parents would not have a conversation with her being like, hey, you exist within this culture, yes, but you're not in it in that way. You know what I mean? Like, you're not Black. You're not Black. I would say at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure her intention behind this was never to tell a nuanced and true story. What we have been seeing so much of lately is just this rage bait media. I think we need to honestly stop kind of giving people and companies the benefit of the doubt to a certain extent. What everyone has realized is to make noise in the algorithm, in the news, in anything these days is to evoke a strong emotion. And oftentimes the easiest emotion to evoke is rage, unfortunately. And so even we saw this with Matt Rife and Elf. And I think they think getting the name out there at the end of the day is more important than the harm to the brand reputation that it'll take. Because everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people are talking about this show right now that probably otherwise would have slid by unnoticed. And it's all because it's capitalizing on people responding to the rage that they feel, on the hurt that they feel, especially from someone that is seen as so successful within our community. It's really upsetting to see lately that we have kind of just like lost the art of positivity and nuance to a certain extent in media, whether that be looking outside on the news, on the macro scale, and just seeing like devastation after devastation, all these horrible things happening in the world. And I'm not saying that attention shouldn't be called to those, but the amount of negativity in the media right now, and again, media, social media, TV, fictional, real, all this, it is impacting how people's brains are working. Like, we weren't wired to just consume this negative, we weren't wired to just consume this negative energy 24/7. There has to be balance. And I think Kiki took an opportunity. If she wanted to tell a story about an HBCU, there was so many other options. If she wanted to tell the story about a Korean adoptee in this family, there were so many other options. You didn't have to put her at an HBCU. You could have done a more nuanced exploration. She could have done a more nuanced exploration of, you know, this Korean American girl finding her in between of the heritage of her Korean born heritage and her being raised in Black culture. But from what I've heard about the show, there's really no exploration into her Korean identity at all. There's a lot of different avenues that this could have taken that would have made it an actually good piece of art, dare I say, that were ignored. And instead, it was opted to choose the thing that she knew would enrage the audience, get people to hate watch, to clip, to post, to respond to, and just, you know, promote it that way. All this to say, if you are an aspiring filmmaker, artist, anybody of that kind, putting things out into the world for people to consume, maybe consider that the strong emotion people need evoked at this time is hope, positivity, glee, community, so many of that. I think we have enough rage in the world at this point. That's my take on it. Thanks for joining me, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. Bye.
Great.